Hello and welcome back to the New Weight Paradigm. I am Deanna Bedoya. Happy to have you here. This is a podcast video series where we look at weight from an evidence-based perspective, like we look at the science, but we also throw in some like realistic, what do you do with the science viewpoints, and also have really a heart-based approach where I say we, I mean me, where I look at weight in a way that ideally doesn't promote any judgment or shame. We're just like really talking about like how weight is regulated and how, if that is something you want to do, is change your weight, how to do that in a way that doesn't mess with your mental health, actually improves your quality of life, and just helps you live healthier and just more joyfully. I'm all about joy, and that's what this podcast series is about. So in today's video, though, we're gonna kind of go a step beyond what we talked about in the last podcast. In the last one, we talked about like the fundamentals of energy balance, how like weight is regulated, how you gain fat mass, how you gain weight because you gain fat, and how you lose weight because you lose fat. And then like the behaviors that go into that as well. One thing I mentioned in passing in that last video is that what we often don't talk about, though, is that, okay, if you want to lose weight from the body, you need to achieve and maintain a consistent caloric deficit, meaning that you're consistently consuming fewer calories than you're burning, right? So you're eating fewer calories and you're burning more, mainly through physical activity. However, if it was really that simple, don't you think more of us would be able to achieve and maintain a healthy weight? If it was really as simple as just telling people to eat less and exercise more, then wouldn't you think that more of us would be able to do those things? And what I'm getting to, slowly, but I'm getting there, and what I'm getting to is that although a caloric deficit is what's required to lose fat mass from the body fights it. The body is very good at staying at a larger size and even gaining fat mass. The body is really good at putting on fat mass. For most people, not all people, but for a lot of people, it's really good at putting on fat mass, which explains why the majority of the Canadian population, for instance, are in bodies that are kind of above a BMI of 25, which BMI is a terrible measure of health, but it's a so-so measure of health. But the fact that so many of us are now in larger bodies, right, compared to before, it often suggests that like it's really easy to gain fat mass, especially in our modern environment. Okay? It's really easy to gain it, but one of the reasons, or some of the reasons why it's so difficult to lose fat mass and keep it off is because, as I've mentioned, the body likes to defend that higher point that we get to. And so that's the topic of today's conversation, is how the body defends against weight loss, right? It doesn't necessarily set us up for success. If your measure of success is weight loss, it doesn't really like help us be successful because of how it likes like no. It says like no to weight loss. And I'll tell you how it says no. It's going to be mainly through an increase in our desire to eat. Right? And you probably know this. When you are at an energy deficit, when you're at a caloric deficit, you're eating less and maybe moving more, you're probably in a state where you often think about food a lot more or have a desire to eat a lot more. Okay? And that's one of the main ways your body defends against weight loss. So in this video, we're going to talk about that and some of the studies that have shown that. But I am always going to get back to like, what do we do about it? And offer you some suggestions that you can then play with to see what's going to help you, get to a place where you feel really comfortable with your own behaviors and maybe with your body size as well. Okay. So as I mentioned, the body is really good at putting on fat mass. For most of us, it's really good at putting on fat mass. We just store more fat in our fat cells and make more fat cells. And that, you could argue, is an evolutionary advantage. Like it's something that it is believed that we evolved to do to to be really good at storing fat energy on the body, because through almost all of human history, except for now, through almost all of human history, energy hasn't been abundant. It hasn't been everywhere. For most of human history, populations have gone through periods where there's a lot of food, feast, and then periods where there's no food, famine, right? So, for instance, if there wasn't as much, plants available in a particular area that people were, or there wasn't as much like animals in that area at a particular time, there was less opportunity to find food, right? So it makes sense from a energy regulation perspective that we have genes that promote a desire to put more energy on the body. And that's actually what we find in obesity, is that individuals with obesity, they tend to have a lot of changes in their genes that are associated with appetite, right? And that might be like evolutionarily advantageous if we lived in an environment where food wasn't so abundant, okay? However, our modern food environment is ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous how much food there is, how available it is, how cheap it is, and how it's manufactured to be super high in calories and really high in a combination of sugar and fat. And a combination of sugar and fat is something that our brain loves. It's like, yeah, to a combination of these like highly processed, high in sugar and fat foods. Our brain loves those, and we've been evolved to seek those foods out, right? Because they're quick sources of energy. And that helps us store more energy on our body, which is great for when periods of times when food's not available. But those periods of time where food's not available, for the most part, those don't exist in a lot of modern societies. Okay? In Canada, I'll speak to Canada. I live just outside of Vancouver in a place called Burnaby. And here, like, I have so many food options everywhere. There's food everywhere, right? So even if I want it, so like there's no famine. There's never any famine that we go through, at least here right now, that's going to make it advantageous to store more fat on the body. Okay, so my point is that the body does defend against weight loss because from an evolutionary perspective, it is advantageous to store fat on the body because for most of human history, we had no idea when food would become available again, right? It wasn't as predictable as it is now, okay? So how does your body defend against weight loss? How does it defend against losing fat from the body? There are two main ways it does this, okay? One is through changes in metabolism. If you just weigh less, if you have less muscle, if you have less fat, you're going to burn fewer calories. So as your weight goes up or down, so does your metabolism. A larger body has a higher basal metabolic rate, will burn more calories. But as we get into a smaller body, our basal metabolism gets slower. Sometimes I just say it's slower, but it's just burning fewer calories. So when we lose weight, we actually need fewer calories to maintain that new weight, okay? However, so that's part of the equation. I would personally argue what I believe is the main way that our body defends against weight loss is by making us hungry. And you probably noticed this, right? If you have ever gone on a type of plan that promotes a caloric deficit, what you've probably noticed is maybe you got really hungry or thought about food a lot, or found it really difficult to maintain that energy deficit because of these signals. These signals are not your fault. They're your body defending against weight loss. They're like part of how your body works. We can manage them, but we have to be aware that they exist. And if you are trying to get into a caloric deficit, you're trying to eat fewer calories and maybe burn more calories, you have to be aware that biology is going to kick in and fight that. And there's ways that we can manage those signals, but they exist and they're very real. And it's one of the reasons I don't believe that, like, if people have a hard time losing weight and keeping it off, I don't really believe that's their fault. That's just biology resisting weight loss. Okay, but we can learn to work with those signals and make it so it doesn't feel as strong. And actually, I'm not talking about weight loss medication right yet, but I'll talk about it in the future. That's actually how weight loss medication works. The main weight loss medications that are out right now, like Ozempic and Wegovy and something called Saxenda or Contrave, naltrexone and bupropion, all those medications work by working on appetite signals. That's the main way they work. They work in other ways too, but they help to reduce that feeling of hunger that we often have when we're on a caloric deficit. Okay, so this isn't a plug for them, right? That's a really individual choice and something that you maybe want to consult with your doctor. But why I bring that up is that the fact that those work tell us why weight loss typically doesn't work. The fact that weight loss medications work by reducing hunger tells us that what often stops us from losing weight is this increase in hunger. Okay, so let's look at some of the evidence that supports this. And one of the major formative studies that comes up all the time in this kind of area, which is I was going to say fun study, but I don't know if it was fun. It doesn't sound very fun. It's a fun study to look at, but it wasn't probably fun for the people that went through it. Okay, so during World War II, there was something called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, the Minnesota Starvation Study, run by someone named Ansel Keys, where basically they took these 32 healthy men who were all in lean bodies. That's important that they started lean, and they basically starved them. They locked them up at a university. They weren't allowed to leave. All their food was controlled, and they put them on a diet that was less than half of what they typically ate. So the men typically, those 32-ish men, they typically ate about 3,500 calories a day. And they, for the most part, put that in half, right? So these men were now eating 1,600 calories a day. That's a crazy deficit. That's a very hard to maintain deficit. And the goal of the study was to mimic the starvation patterns that were sometimes experienced by people that were going through the famines associated with World War II, or that were prisoners of war and were starved in that situation. The goal of the study was when these people come back and they've been starved, how do we refeed them healthy? So it's actually about the best refeeding plan. But this study was so formative because it told us a lot about, when you put people in this extreme starvation, this is extreme starvation, right? What we really got a sense of how the body defends against that. Okay, so what happened when these men went on this very, very calorically deficity diet, when they ate very, very few calories? They became obsessed with food. They would put up pictures of food in their cubbies. They collected cookbooks. They read recipes. They lost interest in sex. They some people said they almost got a pornographic obsession with food. Okay. They developed, some of these men developed something called they developed depression. They developed severe emotional distress, and they had issues with concentration and focus. Also, their hair fell out, their skin, it got bad. It got really bad. And they, I said, they became obsessed with food to a point they would watch a movie and be pissed off if the people in the movie, or even people that were eating around them, didn't finish all their food. There was a psychological obsession with that food, right? And we're going to tease out some of the hormones involved in that in another study, but this gives you a sense of if you put someone on that much of a restriction, the brain's no, it'll zero in and focus and narrow attention towards food and food related things, because it's you aren't getting enough calories. You need these. I'm defending against weight loss by making you think and obsess about food that much. When I say I am making you, it's mainly hormones that are taking part in that. And like I said, I'll explain that a bit further in a further study. So this was a foundational study in how hard it is to deprive the body that much, and how much the body fights back psychologically. Something else this study showed is that when people go on this extreme starvation diet and they then gain the weight back, so after the study completed, they during the study, they like slowly gained some weight back. They got increased calories. But even after the study, a lot of these men ate a lot more, right? Of course, when the study's over, the trial is over, the diet, quote unquote, diet is over, these men ate a lot more, and a lot of them gained a decent amount of weight. And what's interesting, just as a side note of this study, is that the weight they gained back, they actually gained back an amount of weight a little bit more than what they had lost. So, right, they gained a little bit more weight overall than where they started from. But also the weight they gained back, there was more fat in it. It's something called a concept called fat overshoot. That when often we gain weight back, especially when we go on like extreme diets, in this case, we tend to preferentially gain fat mass over muscle mass or lean body mass. And that's not something we ideally like, right? So extreme diet, these lean men on an extreme diet became obsessed with food, developed a bunch of psychosocial symptoms as well. And after that diet was over, they gained about 10% more weight back than what they started from, and a lot more of that weight was from fat compared to what they started from. Okay, so this was really like a foundational study that showed us how the body resists weight loss. Okay, adding to this study, so that's like the what happened, but like how? Why were these men obsessed with food? Why were they thinking about it so much? Why did they, after the study was over, gain so much more weight back? Well, there was a study done in 2011 that was really, foundational at letting us know how the body defends against weight loss. Okay, so this study is called The Long-Term Persistence of Hormonal Adaptations to Weight Loss. Okay, in the New England Journal of Medicine, October 27th, 2011, by Priya Sumithran et al. And in this study, they didn't start with lean people who were lean. They started with individuals with obesity. Okay, so they started with people that already had a BMI that was higher. The average BMI was 35. Again, BMI, we'll talk about it in another episode. It's not a perfect way to measure someone's weight, but it tells us something. Okay, so they started with 50 people, 2/3 of which were female, with the average BMI of 51, and they put them on a very low calorie diet using something called OptiFast shakes. Okay, they had consumed a bit of vegetables as well, but their main part of their diet was this OptiFast shake, which put them on a very, very low calorie amount overall. Okay, so first study finding that I think is really interesting about this is that of the 50 people, only 34 completed the study. So 16 people dropped out. That's a significant portion. Okay, that's like 30% of people dropped out, which tells you a lot about how going on these extreme diets is very difficult. Something else another outcome of the study that's very common as well is that you often see a big drop in weight in the beginning. So in this study, in the first 8 to 10 weeks, weight drops significantly, about 13.5 kilograms, because they were on a very low calorie diet. But then after about 8 weeks, you see the weight trending up again. Okay, you see a bit of what we might call a J-shaped curve. Okay, but the upper part of the J is a bit more flattened. In this study, at least, people didn't go back to their previous weight, at least at the end of the study, about a year later. Okay, but one of the main findings is that, yeah, they lost a bunch of weight in the beginning, but not everyone was able to stick to it, A. And B, even though they lost a bunch of weight in the beginning, they tended to start gaining it back after about 8 weeks. Now, why? Why did they start gaining that weight back? Well, when they measured the circulating levels of certain signaling molecules involved in appetite regulation, what they found is that when these people were deprived of calories, they were on a very, very low calorie diet, there was increases in something called ghrelin. Ghrelin is sometimes called the hunger hormone. It is something that we know that when it spikes, people tend to have higher appetites. Okay, so there was increases in the type of hormone that makes you eat more, and there was decreases in something called peptide YY, another hormone called amylin, and another one called CCK, cholecystokinin, there was decreases in the hormones that are associated with making you eat less. So, very low calorie diet, lost a bunch of weight in the beginning, started to gain it back right after about 8 weeks. What's probably causing that increase in weight? This change in hunger hormones. The hunger hormone itself, ghrelin, went up, and those that are more like satiety hormones, make it fullness hormones like peptide YY, amylin, and CCK, these all tended to go down, had more what we call attenuated responses. They didn't make us feel full as much as they did before. Okay, and something as like a side note, there was also a reduction in a hormone called leptin, which is also associated with eating less. Okay, so in this study, what they found is all the eat less signals went down and all the eat more signals went up when people were on a very low calorie diet. Okay, and when they asked these people, can you rate your hunger levels? People at 10 weeks and 62 weeks in this study tended to have higher hunger ratings and a higher desire to eat rating when they're on this caloric deficit, which is like unsurprising. Are you surprised? Put someone on a very low calorie diet, hunger signal, you feel more hunger, right? Your desire to eat goes up. But why I think this is super important to talk about is because I think a lot of the times we feel like failures when we try to eat less, we try to go on a caloric diet deficit, but we're not able to sustain it. Well, of course, it's difficult to sustain it because your body is screaming at you to eat more. And maybe not screaming, but that's what it might feel like. I know sometimes my desire to eat, especially when I've been on restrictive diets in the past, which luckily I'm past now, but when I've gone on those, it's like this loud, overwhelming sound. It's not even a sound, I can't even describe it, but like this force, right? Acting on the brain that's telling my brain, eat, and it's yelling at my brain to eat. And again, that's why weight loss medications work, is because they decrease that signal that's screaming at you to eat. So what I really want to emphasize here is that the body does send out signals that increase your desire to eat when you are on a very, when you're on some sort of caloric deficit, when you are eating a lot less. That is not a character flaw. That is physiology. That is biology. That is how your body works. Okay, so don't feel bad if that's what's happened in the past and you've gained weight back in the past when you've tried to lose it. That makes sense because your body is screaming at you to go back to your old behaviors or to overcompensate with other behaviors. Okay, so I wanted to read out the part of the conclusion of this study. Okay, so although short-term weight loss is readily achieved through dietary restriction, so yeah, you can lose weight by eating a lot less, only a small minority of, they say obese people with obesity, maintained diet-induced weight loss in the long term. This is why it's so difficult to keep weight off. You can lose it quickly, but the reason it's hard to keep it off is because of these signals, okay? A multitude of hormones, peptides, and nutrients are involved in the homeostatic regulation of body weight, many of which are perturbed after weight loss. So I do some videos on appetite regulation, and one of the things we talk about is all the signals involved. And we don't even know all the signals involved, quite honestly. But there's so many signals that change when we try to lose weight, when we try to enter into a caloric deficit, that tell the brain, it's a brain thing, that tell the brain to eat more. Okay? An important finding of this study, to go a bit further, is that many of these alterations, so many of those changes in hormones, persisted for 12 months after weight loss, even after a person started to gain weight again. Okay? So, and they said that gain of weight had a strong physiological basis and is not simply the result of the voluntary resumption of old habits. So, can you hear this and be compassionate with yourself? for all the times maybe that you've tried to enter into a caloric deficit, maybe to lose weight, and you weren't able to sustain it? Can you be compassionate about yourself with yourself about that, because you now know that your body fights against that? Can you be compassionate with yourself about that? And if you want to again have a weight-based approach to health and get into a caloric deficit that's going to perhaps lower your weight, can you now look at that from a perspective of, I need to think about my hunger, and I need to think about how restrictive my diet's going to be, or else I'm not going to be able to maintain it? Can you think about like how you can adopt new behaviors that are actually enjoyable and that make you feel good, so those hunger signals maybe don't feel as strong? And can you work with your body and be kind with your body for just doing what it does? This doesn't make you a failure for having a lot of hunger signals when you're on a diet, when you're trying to lose weight. It doesn't make you a bad person, because that's just how your body works. The body defends against that. Okay? Doesn't mean you can't lose weight. Doesn't mean you can't maintain and achieve a caloric deficit, a new caloric place that you stay in. Doesn't mean you can't do that. I've done it. Other people have done it. It's absolutely possible. But you have to work with your body, and you have to understand that your body doesn't make it easy. Okay? But it is possible. It is 100% possible. And then I wanted to throw in as well that there is these like physiological, these like hormonal changes that promote a gain in weight again, but also your psychology is going to make it a bit difficult to lose weight, to change the behaviors, to get into a caloric deficit that's going to lead to weight loss. Why? Because it's always easier for your brain to do what it's always done. You probably did what you did today. So think of your morning. The way your morning went down is probably similar to the way you always morning. Because your brain is used to that, and it has defaults, and it likes to go back to those defaults because they're the easiest thing. I don't have to create new connections, right? Or integrate other connections. If I just keep defaulting, these are like neural pathways. If you're seeing me right now, I'm making this like motion that I'm trying to represent neural pathways. Those neural pathways, it's just easier for them to fire in the same way all the time. You're used to doing things a certain way. So when you start doing things a new way, your brain's like, what the heck? Right? It's like, I don't know what you're doing and I don't like it. It doesn't like change. It'll get used to change, but it doesn't like it in the short term. Also, and I kind of alluded to this, you're going to respond to food cues in a similar way than you always have. So, the same things that trigger your appetite now, they're also going to be there when you're trying to lose weight, when you're at a caloric deficit, plus you have the extra hunger signals involved, right? So the way your psychology works is going to probably promote your current habits. And then the hunger signals are also going to want you to go back to those old habits as well. Okay, so like I kind of am alluding to, it's psychologically costly, I'm going to call it, to do things differently. So what do you do about that? I don't like to focus on the problem, right? The whole point of this podcast is to actually be more solutions-based and individual-based. Like, how do you figure things out for yourself based? So your body defends against weight loss. It doesn't like when you're in a caloric deficit. It doesn't like to lose too much fat mass. It's funny, it doesn't, but it also likes the health benefits of that. Like, it's healthier to often have a more lean composition. So it likes that part of things, but it doesn't like the caloric deficit part of things because it fights back against that. So what do you do about this? Okay, so in the next couple slides, I want to talk about how you can work with your body now that you have this knowledge, now that we've gotten rid of the blame of why weight regain happens. You understand that. So that blame is out of the picture. Your body's going to defend against weight loss, mainly by an increase in appetite, mainly an increase in the desire to eat. So how do you work with that? Well, as I keep coming back to, I really believe in something called appetite mastery, which is about figuring out the signals that are making you eat the way you do and controlling the ones you can control. So for instance, with some of those appetite signals, one of the things that can help work with them is eating in a way where those signals are optimized. So for instance, eating more whole foods can optimize the release of some of those signals. Focusing on processed foods, like eating a lot of foods that are like in brightly colored packages and tend to be higher in sugar and fat, those don't promote the same kind of fullness responses than like eating more whole foods. Okay, so that's one. Appetite Mastery has different parts of it, but that's like one thing that you could maybe focus on. And then, like I said, I have lots of YouTube videos on that as well that you can check out. I also recommend getting just like I keep talking about like data collection in these videos, that like, can you just sit back from a place of curiosity, not a place of judgment, not a place of shame? Can you sit back and observe your defaults? Observe how you usually do things. Observe when you get hungry, which times of day you get hungry, which situations make you want to eat a lot more. Can you get familiar with those? Can you just collect data? I'm not even asking to change anything yet. Can you just collect data about these situations? And then are there tweaks you can make? Maybe there's certain cues that are always going to make you want to eat. So for instance, I think I've talked about this before, like ice cream. I love ice cream. It's a cue I can't resist. So I know that if I keep ice cream in the home, I have a really hard time not overdoing it with ice cream because it's so good. Okay, so I try not to keep it in the home because I know that that's a cue that currently I don't have the level of cognitive restraint to help stop myself from overindulging in. Okay, so get familiar with like, what are your cues? Is your cue like an emotional situation? Are you all fine and good in your like plan to quote unquote eat less and move more, get into a caloric deficit? Is that all going well until you fight with your partner, or until your kids are like driving you crazy, or until something happens that like takes a lot of emotional effort to deal with? And maybe you use food in that situation as a coping mechanism, which makes total sense. There's no judgment in that. But like, is that a cue that's making you eat? You need to figure yourself out. That's part of the new weight paradigm, is this individualization and figuring yourself out in the cues that are making you eat the way you do. I also strongly believe in not letting yourself get too hungry. And that's a bit of like eating whole foods and eating protein-rich foods. That's part of it. But also what might help with some people, and again, it's play work, decide what works for you. Can you like watch yourself during the day and see when your hunger gets high? And can you maybe eat something that fills you up before hunger kicks in, right? So for some people, like eating smaller meals throughout the day works. Depends on the person. For some people, eating foods higher in protein works so they don't feel so hungry. I know that whenever I've like restricted in the past, it's so easy to eat less during the day, but at night, that's when if I haven't eaten enough during the day, my hunger signals are at their highest and I want to eat everything in front of me. So it's so important for me personally to not let myself to get into levels of hunger that override everything else. I like can't think clearly when I'm that hungry, and I'll eat anything you put in front of me, right? So can you eat in a way that keeps you more or less full throughout the day so hunger doesn't take over, right? And that might mean keeping snacks on you. Maybe keep some in your purse or your bag. Maybe it means eating foods higher in protein. Maybe it means like meal planning. So you have like, when you go to make a decision, it's easy to make that decision because it's right in front of you. There's lots of ways to approach it, but I really recommend not letting yourself get too hungry, not letting those hunger signals get out of control, because it's really hard to restrain yourself when your brain is screaming at you to eat, which is how it feels like to me. Okay. So another thing to consider is like, what is a realistic way that you can change your behavior to eat at a more moderate amount that's actually sustainable? What are you 90% sure that you can do for the rest of your life? So for instance, if I, let's say, drank Coca-Cola every day, let's say I had 2 Coca-Colas every day, right? I would have to look at that habit and be like, is it realistic for me to say that I can drink 1 less Coca-Cola? Am I 90% sure that I can drink 1 less Coca-Cola per day? Okay, or half a Coca-Cola per day, or whatever, type of food that might be. If you aren't 90% sure that you can actually change your behavior in a sustainable way, that you can adopt this new habit, this new way of doing things in a sustainable way, then maybe it's an opportunity to look at what else are you like absolutely sure you can do. And that's a way to start things out, right? And something that can help you perhaps to adopt these new behaviors is to really think about your values and what's important to you. Why do you want to consume fewer calories? Why do you want to, for instance, move more? Especially given that your body's going to fight that with an increase in hunger. Why is it so important for you to like also take like a hunger management approach, but also to change these behaviors? Why is that so important to you? Is it so you can, play with your kids more? Is it so you can enjoy a lifestyle full of traveling? Is it so, you have more fitness to do maybe something that like you can hike a mountain you want to hike, right? Can you look at your values and like attach importance to these values to a point where you're like excited about maintaining the new behaviors you're maintaining, even though your body's gonna maybe fight against some of these changes? You really have to learn to love a new way of living your life. And again, I keep coming back to like, you got to manage your hunger signals because that's going to make it really difficult. But you also want to find a way, and it's been very important for me to find a way to like love eating healthy, love moving my body, right? I love, I like to eat unhealthy too, just for the sake, and I like to be lazy too. But I feel best when I'm eating well, and I feel best when I'm moving my body more, right? I love the way that feels, and that's part of my identity too. I tell myself I'm a healthy person. And that makes me value those behaviors, even though my body's going to resist some of those changes, right? And also maybe focusing on non-weight outcomes might be healthy for you to maybe try to manage some of the psychological effects of weight loss, right? Of trying to lose weight. Can you focus on like how you feel every day? Maybe how you're managing your cravings. If that's become more successful, like I mentioned, I'm going to run a group program on that in the fall of 2023 if you want to get on the wait list for that. But maybe you're moving more, maybe you like how your fitness is increased, maybe you don't night eat anymore. Can you focus on non-weight outcomes that bring you a lot of joy, that help to kind of manage some of the things that can be not so easy about getting into a new way of living your life? Right? But like I keep saying, if you want to get to a body size that's maybe smaller, maybe for health reasons, okay, or for other reasons, it's up to you, you do you, right? If you want to get to a smaller body size and stay there, then you have to adopt changes that are going to last the rest of your life to keep that new standard of that new, maybe lower energy intake. But your body's going to resist that in part. So can you manage your hunger as you do that? Can you really fall in love with the new behaviors so it's so fun and it just becomes part of what you do, right? These are all things to consider, and these are all part of this new way of looking at weight. Again, remember, when it comes to weight, it's up to you whether you want to take a weight-based approach to health or not. You can choose to not focus on weight at all, 100% up to you. Maybe you focus on, adopting healthy behaviors just because it feels good. That's totally up there as well. Totally there is a possibility too. But in the new weight paradigm, if you choose to focus on weight loss as a goal, to change the behaviors that can promote weight loss as a goal, we always want to start from a place of fundamental self-worth. We want to realize that the body's going to defend against weight loss, and that we have to be realistic about our goals and what can be our new settling point with our weight, where our hunger signals aren't driving us to eat too much, but our lifestyle is actually enjoyable and we can actually sustain it. That's your best weight, right? That might not be as small as maybe you think it is. Some people, they're really trying to get very thin, and I'm choosing my words carefully here. You can choose to do with your body whatever you want to do with your body, but I'm just sometimes worried about what effect that has on mental health, especially if the size you're trying to achieve is unrealistic, given how much your body is going to make that difficult for you, in part because of the appetite signals it's going to send you, right? So again, we want to include our body in this process. We want to recognize that our body is a friend that can help us with data collection to help us figure out what path is going to work best for us, because it's about finding our own unique way. And we do that by playing. We do that by trying things out, seeing how it goes, seeing how it feels. Today, my hunger signals were high. Oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder what I ate. I wonder, did I not eat for too long of a period of time and then my hunger signals got overwhelming? Oh, that's good data. That means that I need to eat more consistently, right? And this is part of mastering your appetite. Okay, so at the end of the day, always come back to, you're amazing. You deserve to feel amazing every day, regardless of what your weight is. And you can choose to take a weight-based approach to health, sure, but understand the body's going to resist that. And that's why we tend to lose a lot of weight in the beginning and then trend back upwards soon after, right? That's not a personal failure. That's your body saying no, it's better for me to store energy on the body. Okay, so at the end of the day, you want to make sure that whatever lifestyle approaches you're taking, they're actually sustainable and they're making your life better, right? And they're promoting peace between your brain, your body, and your heart as well. I know that sounds idealistic, but why not? Why not aim for a place where we just feel really good in our bodies and we feel at peace with our minds and we're accepting of what our body can and can't do, and we celebrate how awesome our body is and use it to enjoy our lives more. That's my goal. That's what I'm about. Okay. So anyways, thanks for listening today. Hopefully you learned some things, and always great to hear from you as well. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it on Spotify, or I think it's on Apple too. I don't know. I'm just learning as I go. Give it a good rating. I'll take a 5-star. That would be awesome. This helps me be motivated to keep doing these things. And then this on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube as well. And then I mentioned, if you want more help, especially with cravings, and I'll do a video on cravings in the future, but if you want more help managing your appetite, mastering your appetite and mastering your craving, I'm going to be running a group program on this in the fall of 2023. Get on the wait list now. I'll be offering special deals for the people that sign up a bit earlier. You'll get more information soon enough. But you can go to my website, Diana Bedoya. My name is Deanna, spelled Diana, Bedoya.com, and you can find a link there for signing up, for getting on the wait list for that, or learning more information about that. But beyond that, I hope you have a fantastic day, and you're awesome just the way you are. Thanks for being here. See you next time.